everyone, and welcome to my capstone project. My name is Joe Keeley, and today I will be talking to you about my internship with Whiting Turner. So to give you some background on the project, I was working on a massive data center campus for a company called Quantity Technology Services, or QTS. This was in the corporate zone of New Albany, right on Beecher Road, if anyone knows where that is, actually next to Amazon, Google, and Facebook, the other data centers that are out there. And the data center that I was working on, the one that you can see down in these pictures, was about, I think, 25 acres large with the entire campus, with landscaping and everything included, about 60 acres total. So pretty large building. Each building had about 6 data halls in it, broken up with 3 on each floor. And then the entire site was powered by an on-site transformer that was built actually solely for these data centers. And each power station produced about 130 megawatts of critical power. And then the capabilities of the backup power of the generators and the transformers we actually built in case anything went wrong or power went down was about 150 megawatts of power, which is a lot of power, so much to the point where you could probably power a small town, I think, with it. So some of our economic analysis. The main one we're going to talk about is just the increase of local jobs, local activity increase, like waste management, security systems. I know that was a big one we needed. Constantly having the roads swept outside the site or having on-site security, considering we had roughly between 400 to 600 employees coming in and out every day. Another one was the surrounding property prices were increasing, so this is a good thing for those other companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google that are going around or around the same area. And then the other last thing for the local mark is that it built the local energy infrastructure up, and this gave a huge boost to all the other data centers around, gave the energy capabilities to produce other things, give temp power to people that may need it, building other data centers in the same area. So that's pretty cool, because that pre-existing infrastructure helps other companies, maybe if they want to build around them or start their own small business around that, as I mentioned in the regional. Another regional factor was that it draws a lot of conferences, events, or business tours around, and this is huge because it just helps with local tourism and hospitality for the industries that are around there. And like I said, those 3 big ones, Google, Amazon, Facebook, are all going to be pretty much working together with those events, and it's going to be a huge thing for the local tourism. As for the state impacts, a lot of them include more regulations and zoning and policies and stuff like that. I'm not sure exactly if there has been any in place, but I would assume it being in the corporate zone with other large companies like that, they would have some sort of regulations or policies that have been put in place to benefit those data centers and help them, whether it be with energy power or some sort of, maybe tax exemption, stuff like that. As for the environmental analysis, unfortunately our site wasn't very LEED accredited or green accredited at all, I think. For the most part, they just wanted to have the building up as quickly as possible and be as secure and safe as possible, considering how much money was going to be in the server rooms technically. However, some of the ideas that I had to maybe increase the LEED accredited or green accredited builds were we could involve solar panels on our roof, considering how large it was. This would help with more power, backup power, stuff like that. Same thing with wind power. We could add wind turbines either on the landscape around or maybe even possibly on the roof, if possible, considering how structurally sound it was with the steel I-beams. And this would also just be another form of backup power in case we needed it. And then another thing we could have done is the efficient cooling systems or rainwater harvesting, because every data center actually needed to have a chiller unit, or if not multiple chiller units, for it to keep it cool so that they wouldn't overheat and destroy the servers. And those cooling systems actually required water to be constantly pumped through them. So if they were able to find an efficient way to reuse that water or even harvest rainwater to reuse in that cooling system, that could help improve their costs and their cooling system costs. Another possibility they could have done was sustainable building materials. This one isn't as more realistic considering the scale of the project and how large it was and the needs structurally. However, there were parts of the building where maybe like the office and such like that aren't as structurally needed, that are more aesthetic. They could have added more sustainable building materials. However, like I said, I think they wanted this building to last as long as it could, which sustainable building isn't always the best option if you're looking for long-term goals and hoping that the building is going to stay up for long-term. Now, what I did on the impacts, a lot of my stuff was pretty basic, QAs, QCs, progress trackers, photos, doing our daily meetings, our AHA meetings, and our DAB meetings. Those are pretty normal stuff. And then just shutting down all the light towers in the morning from the concrete work prior to that night. That was a fun one to start my morning every day. Some of my impacts I had on the project, I played a huge part in the concrete work and all of the roofing work. Some of my QCs include, as you see here, just showing the flaking and the minor blemishes we had on the concrete work. Another one I did was making sure we had proper bleed out on our EPDM roof rolls. That was a big one. We weren't hitting our original mark of 1.5 inches. So we sent an RFI to the engineers, got some feedback, said they were completely okay with 1 inch bleed out, went around, made sure everything was correct, checked it, got it all good, checked it off, and moved on. Now, as for the scheduling, I didn't have as much of a play in the scheduling, so I can't talk about it as much, but I did know that the schedule was made on Excel spreadsheet by our lead PM, and he was kind of in charge of running everything, making sure it was going smoothly. As for the Whiting Turner employees, they all were fortunate enough to have a hard copy of the schedule for about 2 months prior to where they were that day. This gave them the ability to just kind of follow and track to make sure we were on track with everything, people were getting their job done. We weren't missing certain milestones and benchmarks. And some of the problems we did have weren't too major, but we were able to deal with them properly and not have it cause a huge setback in our job. Some of those, like I mentioned, were concrete flaking was a big one, misplaced plumbing lines on our slab on grade, using galvanized boats with non-galvanized I-beams was a big one, and then the size for the chiller units actually being improper, not being able to be put on the mezzanine. So the performance analysis I had, having said all that, our lead PM handled all of these really well. Most people get pretty frustrated when they have some setbacks, but he handled it cool, calm, and collected. Didn't really set us back in maybe 2 weeks. Made sure we hit all of our benchmarks, and additionally, with all of the stuff our team faced, whether it be some unhappy trades workers or a setback in the schedule, they all handled it with respect and professionalism, which I really was impressed with because that's not something you're always going to see in construction. So the big problem I want to talk about is the issue of concrete flaking. This is kind of one that I really played a big part in, and I did a lot of work for and a lot of QCs. As you can see, we had a lot of problems throughout. I think we had 15 slab on metal deck pours and 8 metal or slab on grade pours. So we had a lot of concrete to look at. And this is basically just what it looks like when you have these flaking issues, and they're just due to there being moisture under the concrete, it heating up too quickly, poor concrete mix, or even water damage. A culmination of things can cause this. So our first idea about what was causing this issue is we thought it was the humidity in the sun from it being about 80 to 90 degrees every day and getting direct sun pretty much beat down on top of the drying concrete. So that was our first idea. So we put up some shade layers to see if that helped, but unfortunately that didn't really help. And then after that, we decided to maybe look into the mix design, and it turns out that our mix design was created for a Northern Virginia data center that they did, so an East Coast data center. This was clearly an issue, us being in the Midwest. The East Coast mix design was a much higher moisture content and was much more suitable for high humidity and changing temperatures, whereas when it was put in the Midwest where we were in the summer, it did not handle it well, caused a lot of flaking, would dry too quickly on the top, just caused a lot of issues. So we sent an RFI to our mix designer, got one back, they changed it, got a new mix, and then the following pours from there were a lot better, but still not great, had a couple blemishes here and there. So we had to look back, kind of just do track our steps, figure out what we did wrong. We weren't really 100% able to figure it out right off the bat until we had one of our other PMs actually reach out to a family friend who has their own concrete company and mention that one possible issue that we could be having is the fact that the cages we were using, the rebar cages we were using, were heavily oxidized and rusted from sitting out in the sun and the rain all day in the conditions. This could be causing that flaking. So with that finally in hand, we decided to push forward with our unoxidized rebar cages to find out that whatever chemical was actually producing that was somehow making the chemical imbalance in the mix design to cause the top layer to chip off and flake and break. So after we changed this, it pretty much solved all of our problems. We really didn't have any more flaking issues or any more breakage or anything like that. So that was great. It really helped us streamline the end of our concrete pours. And I would say the entirety of this process, figuring out damage control, whatever you might want to call it, took us about a month and a half of chipping away at it. But in the grand scheme of construction, that's not super long. So in our mind, I feel like we did that pretty well. So I was pretty happy with that solution. As you can see in these two pictures, I think those concrete pours look pretty good, nice and shiny. The client was happy with it, I was happy with it, so we just kind of moved on from there. And then for my closing statements, I just want to mention some of the lessons I learned. The main ones being just being willing to admit when you made a mistake. When a problem arises or you make a mistake, be willing to mention it as soon as possible, because the sooner you bring it up and the sooner you say, hey, I messed up, the sooner you can fix it and move on. And then the last one I've always taken away being into construction is don't act like you know everything. You don't. There's a lot of new stuff coming out. There's always going to be a new way to do something, and there's always going to be somebody who knows more than you. Other than that, thank you for watching my presentation about my internship, and remember to stay safe on site.